What's up, guys? Josh with LynkSpyder. So we're going to try to do a little live session here. If you're watching this on Facebook, we started at 9 o'clock. We're going to do a little bit of a discussion on the GoPro HERO8, and some of it may be very simplistic for those of you who've used it before, but I also realize that we've never really done a video for those that really don't know much about the GoPro. And so we're going to start pretty basic, and the first thing that I want to talk about is this side door. We generally, when we recommend a camera, we generally like to sort of recommend it in its vanilla state so that you don't have to do anything extra. And starting with the GoPro HERO8, that sort of has changed. GoPro used to have a bottom door that had access to the battery and the micro SD card. And then they had a side door, it was usually over here, that had access to the USB-C port and the HDMI port, which never really worked very well. But I say that to say that we would generally just remove that door and we would plug into the USB port and things would be fine. Unfortunately, with the HERO8, what they have chosen to do is to put everything under one door. And I get it. So the baseball softball world is not the biggest market for GoPro. It is a big market, but it's not their biggest market. And so in order to reduce risk, they wanted to make sure that they put everything under a single door, and it's a very rugged door that keeps everything waterproof. Unfortunately, with the baseball and softball world and tennis and some of the other sports that we market to, you really do need to use external power through this USB port. And so we recommend this, I honestly don't know how to pronounce it because we don't have a relationship with them, Ulanzi, the G87. If you just Google GoPro 8 replacement door, these are the guys that it'll come up with. And it mounts just like the GoPro door. It has a bottom latch that comes off and it lifts up. And so if you were to use the standard GoPro HERO8 door, in order to access this port, you would now be leaving the battery susceptible, which, if you took a foul ball off the fence, that could pop out and that could cause an issue. But really more importantly, the micro SD card, which is right down here, because of the way that port works, it would open up access to the motherboard. And honestly, in our environment, I just think that's a really bad idea. And so we really do recommend, if you're going to shoot with the HERO8, to use this replacement door. And the other thing, we talked about how they used to have the door on the bottom. The reason why they took that off is because they've added these guys. I'm not totally sold on this yet. I think it's a neat concept. These are actually, the mounting is aluminum, so it's not flimsy by any means. But what I don't like about, because these hinge, the ability for the camera to move is pretty high. And so if you want to, you could get a frame case for this, or, and you've seen in some of our other posts, we recommend Apulu's aluminum housing that goes on the outside of this to stiffen things up a little bit. You would then not need this. But again, we like to recommend to folks to be able to use it in its vanilla state. So this certainly will work. So these guys come out. This is the Symmetric tripod mount that we've always recommended, and the reason why we recommend it is because it's a single piece aluminum mount. The ones that you get elsewhere are plastic with an insert, and because this is sort of the last single point of failure, you really want to ruggedize this a little bit. And so again, backing up a little bit, for those of you that are new to LynkSpyder, when you get your LynkSpyder in the top center location, these items will be mounted temporarily. We put them there for storage so they don't bang around in the box. But you're going to take these off. You're going to screw this set screw into the bottom of the tripod mount. You're going to do so with this open socket here on the bottom, so that in case this ever got jammed, you could put an Allen wrench in there and have this removed. Then you're going to slip this on top of that. And then you've got a choice at this point. You're going to mount this through these GoPro fingers, but you got to decide which side do you want this? And there's also been some confusion over the years. You know, they say I lock my camera down, but it still flops around. And the reason is because you've probably put the nut or the thumb screw in like this. And if you think about this mechanically, there's nothing that would ever cause this to squeeze. So you want to make sure that when you mount this, that you mount it such that the nut is over here, the threaded end is over here. This goes in across here, and when this edge bottoms out, it squeezes this up against the GoPro fingers, and that's what causes it to lock down. Okay? So that's important with this camera because the USB port is over here. Ordinarily, we used to recommend you mounting it like this because the USB port was here. But in starting with the Hero 8, with the USB port on the right side, we recommend that you mount this on the left side. Now let's say you don't buy the Symmetric tripod mount from us. You've used the GoPro model, you use some of the other models. If you look down the tripod mount on this Symmetric model, you'll notice that it's symmetric, okay? The hole here is in line with this screw. But the plastic ones that you get from other folks are not going to be that way. They're going to be offset a little bit. So what I recommend is that as you're looking at it like this, if this hole is off to the side, you want that to be on the front. You want that to be towards the fence. And the reason is that will allow you to get the camera a little bit closer to the fence. If you mount it to where it's to the back, the camera will be too far away from the fence, and you're probably going to get fence in the shot. But with the Symmetric model, and it's symmetrical, straight up and down, you don't have that issue. But what we do recommend is that you mount the threaded end on the USB side such that, this is difficult with limited finger action here. All right, so you're going to mount that with the nut on this side so that the thumb screw can be on the left side. You would think I'd never done this before. All right. And then, like I said, once this bottoms out, that's going to squeeze and it's going to lock that down. And actually, Symmetric does, and which we're using here, they do make an aluminum thumb screw, and they make actually a wrench to tighten that down. We don't use that. We honestly don't like to use tools in the field because that requires you to use tools in the field, and when you can't find your tool, then you're limited on what you can do. So usually finger tight will keep that camera from moving around too much. All right, so for the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to take this back off so that I can maneuver the camera just a little bit better. All right, I'll shut that down. Okay, so basic GoPro operation. You have a mode button, which is also your power button, and you have a record button. To turn the camera on, you can't just tap it. You press and hold it just a little bit until you see the LCD flash just a little bit, and now your camera's on. All of the GoPro models are slightly different. The last few models have been, the user interface have sort of been the same. They've added a few things with this new user interface that we're going to go over here in a little bit. But some of the common things, swiping left and right actually changes what mode you're in. Everything that we do recording games is in video. So you're going to swipe until you see video. You can either tap it or you can swipe and let it go there, and after a second or so, it will land. Okay? So swiping left and right changes modes. Swiping up will actually get to your videos that you've already recorded. So you can preview those. To get back where you were, you can either swipe this way, or this mode button generally takes you back one level. In any menu that you're in, that will take you back one level. Okay? So swiping left and right gets you into your recording modes. Swiping up gets you to your playback. Swiping down gets you to your preferences. So when we get a new camera, this is generally the first place that we go. The first thing that we do is we click this button here to turn the beeps off. When you start and finish a recording, it generally will it generally will beep. When we mount to the fence, we don't really want any of those things to occur. We don't want any sort of distraction, so we usually turn that off. We're going to go into preferences. Now, your mileage will vary. We recommend turning Wi-Fi off. I get that most people want to use the GoPro and control it with their phone, and you're certainly welcome to do that. However, in the Midwest, we generally play in temperatures of 90 to 105 degrees, and anything that generates heat in your camera takes the risk of shutting the camera down. And Wi-Fi definitely does do that. And so we turned it off. You can use it. Just keep in mind it's going to be one of those things that could generate heat and have a power issue. And so we just choose not to use it. And it's a decision that we've made over the years. We do use it occasionally. We use it early on in the spring when it's not terribly hot. But we also have some volleyball kids that play, and we've had cameras that shut down in an inside air-conditioned gym when we use Wi-Fi. But when we turn Wi-Fi off, we don't have that case. So, again, your mileage may vary. Scrolling down a bit, one of the other things that I want to mention is, actually, I'm still in connections, sorry. Let's back up one level here. Okay, scrolling all the way down to the bottom, when you take video and you pull out the SD card and you copy it to your computer, one thing that I would really recommend is that you don't just delete those videos from your SD card and then pop your card back in. Even though you've deleted those videos, there's still some remnants of stuff in the background. Geeks will talk about the file allocation table. It doesn't really matter why, but what's important is every time you copy videos off of your card and you put it back in the camera, it's very important that you format the card. So let's back up one level. My fingers are really struggling tonight. So we're in the main preferences. We're going to scroll down to the bottom. We're going to hit reset. And we're going to hit format SD card. And it says, are you sure you want to do that? And we're going to format it. And depending on how big of a card you have, we have a 64 in right now. It will take just a little bit longer on the bigger cards. Okay, so after you've copied videos to your computer, you format the SD card. That gets you a good clean connection. The other thing that we recommend when you first get your camera is to go into the general settings. We're going to go into the beep volume and we're going to hit mute because again, we don't want beeps. We talked about that earlier. Auto power off. I personally don't recommend using auto power off. But you're going to be connected to external power, so that really shouldn't apply. However, if your external battery goes dead, and there's various reasons why you would want to do this. Auto power off will only work if you're not recording. So if you're recording and you don't have external power, it's going to continue to record. But I don't like computers to tell me what to do. I really don't like humans to tell me what to do, but I really don't like computers to tell me what to do. So I generally turn that off. LEDs. These are the lights that appear. There's one that comes up here that you'll definitely see when you're charging. There's some light right here, but we turn those off. Right now I've got it set to front off only, but I usually turn that to all off because I don't want to take the risk of anything that might distract someone that they might complain about my camera. I mean, ideally we would like an umpire and the players to go through the game and not really even know we're there. If there are beeps or LEDs, it might cause a distraction, and we certainly don't want that. When your camera comes up the first time, you'll be setting the time and date. You don't need to do that as long as you keep an internal battery on your camera all the time. So one of the things I do is I generally come here and make sure that it's accurate. Date and time isn't necessary when you record, but when you play a lot of games and you're recording every weekend and you're recording a couple of league games during the week, your time and date is very important because that's the time and date that's going to be applied to the file. So as you dump these gigs and terabytes of videos to your computer and you're trying to go back and find that home run that Junior hit on April 31st, 2018, you definitely want the date and time to be accurate so that you can find that. Okay? So that's pretty much all the settings that we change in general. Again, if I want to back up one level, I hit the arrow, but I can also hit this side button, and that will back me up to the main menu. Okay, let's talk about some of the other things. The orientation, that's this button right here. When you first get your camera, you can get orientation landscape, you can get orientation locked. I like orientation locked. I don't know if this is still the case, but we found through testing with the Hero 6, 7, and 8, when auto rotation was turned on, it increased the likelihood that crashing would occur. And when I talk about crashing, I talk about the back screen would lock up. It would still be showing a live view, but it was unresponsive. And if you were recording, the only solution would be for you to pull the battery, which meant you were probably going to lose that last video. And that's a big deal. And that single-handedly is the reason why for years we recommended the Hero 5 and would not recommend the Hero 6 or 7. I suspect that the last upgrade, the last firmware upgrade to the Hero 7 did fix that issue, because we did notice it got better. But unfortunately, when GoPro comes out with a new model, they typically stop offering firmware updates to previous cameras. And so we sort of lost trust. All right, and so I say that to say that right there, if you have a Hero 7 and you're having some lockup issues, you might try that. That helped. Turning off auto low light also helped as well. I don't know which one it was, but we turned them both off, and that generally takes care of that problem. Okay? All right, so let's go back to the main screen again, and let's talk about some of the new things with the Hero 8. For years, GoPro has had what they call field of views. That is the angle at which the camera looks. It is the reason why we don't recommend the white or the silver cameras, because they only have the ultra wide field of views. You cannot adjust them. It is what you see on the screen, and it is generally too wide for most people unless you're shooting on, let's say, a T-ball field. So you definitely want to be able to adjust those field of views, which GoPro now calls lenses. It's the exact same thing. It's the angle at which the lens is looking through the camera. And so I've got mine set on a hotspot down at the bottom left. It's narrow. I can click on that, and I can go between narrow and linear and wide and super wide. Just note that these are basically just zoom locks in between various sections, okay? I generally try to stay on linear, and then I use the zoom button, which is down here, to zoom in order to get the field exactly in my screen. I usually, what I do is I get just the bases, just on the edge each side, first base, third base. I may want to put the coaches in there, but it just depends on what I'm trying to get. But the narrower I can get my view, the more of the actual ball action that I get recorded, and it brings the infield in just a little bit. It brings the detail in the outfield in just a little bit. But if I'm shooting ultra wide, everything is so far away and I'm wasting stuff. There's nothing that's going to go on to the left and the right side, and it's just a waste of screen space. So generally, I set the field of view that gets me close, and then I use this zoom to fit that difference. This is stuff before. So before the Hero 6, I believe starting with the Hero 5, they did not have zoom, and so you had to use a field of view to get close. And if we really wanted the video to look good, we would crop that down in post-production. And it just takes a lot of time, and being able to do this on the screen to get you a good recording without making adjustments is really what you want to do. Okay, again, we're going back up one level. We're going to go back to video. The other thing is the resolution settings. So starting with the Hero 8, they had some presets, and I actually kind of like this, because if you use your camera for things other than ball, or if you have different settings for different fields, then you might want to use this. So you can click this, and it will take you to your preset settings, and you can change these, change the various settings. So you got like a 2.7K at 60 narrow, and when you click on that, it's going to set that preset. I actually really like that, but what I typically do instead of using these presets is I press and hold on this guy instead. And when you press and hold, you actually get to all of the things that are related to that preset. So you've got your resolution, 1080p. I like to shoot in 1080p. We've actually started to do quite a bit of 2.7 just because this camera is able to handle that a little bit more. You know, typically with any electronic device, if you go all the way to the max, you're typically going to push the camera so hard. And the way we use these things, where you record for, you know, 2 to 2.5 hours at a time, you really don't want to push the camera to the max because you're going to take the risk of it shutting down. And so for years, we've recommended 1080p. Again, 2.7K is something that we like to use because it allows us to zoom in post-production on a special play or something. Just gives you a little bit more resolution to work with. Note that these 4.3s, so that's aspect ratio. Most of your TVs are the 16 by, I don't even remember what it is anymore. It's the standard. 4 to 3 is a narrower screen, the old displays. You're probably not going to want to use that. You're probably definitely going to want to use the standard 2.7K. Okay? Back up one level. The lens, I don't usually adjust here because I will adjust that depending on, you know, what field I'm on. Hyper Smooth is their anti-vibration or anti-shake. Because you're mounted to a fence, I would not turn that at all. Turn that on at all. Anti-vibration, anti-shake only works in this axis. It does not work in this axis, forward to back. So the only movement that you're going to get when you mount to a fence is this direction. So I definitely recommend turning that on. One, the less things that you have on, the better the camera is going to operate. Okay, that's first and foremost. But two, Hyper Smooth, because it's a digital adjustment, it actually crops the view in just a little bit so that if it has to make an angular adjustment, you don't have a black strip across the top. So by turning that off, you're actually going to record more detail. Low light, again, we make sure that's off. Zoom, we adjust as we need. Clips. Clips is that fancy little gizmo that will send these small clips to your cell phone, and you're certainly able to use that, certainly able to play with it, but because we record long videos, hours at a time, we generally keep that off. Okay? Standard bit rate when you're recording outside. Shutter, automatic. EV compensation, that's the exposure compensation. The only time that you might want to adjust is if you're dealing with outfield lighting that maybe is throwing off the metering. You may want to adjust that. White balance, that's how digital perceives color. It balances it off of what's known as a gray card. And auto, it tries to estimate what the white balance is or what colors are based on what it sees. Most all the time, you're going to want to keep that on auto. There might be some times if you have some strange colors, say you're playing on a turf field that has some odd colors, and it's throwing your camera off, you might play with some various settings. But in most cases, you're going to leave auto. The ISO, that determines how much it amplifies the exposure, or what's called the gain. In most cases, you're going to leave that to 100 and 1600. If you find that it's metering a little crazy and your video gets really grainy, specifically at nighttime games, you might lower that down to around the 800. Sharpness, if you find that it's creating artifacts in your video, you might adjust that, but high tends to work very well. I would not adjust color outside of GoPro, that's its standard setting. Raw audio, I would leave off unless you're finding that you're just not getting a good audio recording, and then you can sort of manipulate that a bit. But again, that's a setting where you're gonna have to do post-production, and we don't like to do that. Auto wind, this camera has multiple microphones, so leaving that on auto, it will try to make adjustments if you find that if the wind is causing recording adjustments. We generally leave that on auto. Most things we'll leave on auto unless we have a problem, and then we make adjustments. These are the shortcuts that we talked about on the main screen. The lower left is the lens or the field of view. Lower right is zoom. Upper left is slow-mo. And you can click on that and change to about 10 or 15 different settings. All right, and if you make a mistake while you're doing this, you can hit the restore button and it will back up to what it was before. Okay? But what's important to take away from this is what it's not widely, if you're not familiar with this camera, pressing and holding will get you to the ability to manually adjust to whatever you want. So rather than just clicking and having to select something that's already there, clicking and holding gets you to those settings. Okay? Okay. Some of the basics. The top left is the video that you have. Actually, I said 64 earlier. I bet I've got a 32 gig card in here, and the reason I know that is because I've got 2 hours and 38 minutes. A 64 card should get you about 4 hours and 20 minutes. Okay. This icon right here tells you what mode you're in. We're in video mode. Touching the screen makes this stuff go away, so that helps if you're trying to crop the shot a little bit better to get that stuff off your screen. This right here is obviously your battery level. Definitely want to keep an eye on that. So one of the things that we really like to focus on with folks that are new to GoPro, and maybe if you've been around GoPro and you didn't know this, we're going to turn the camera off. Turning the camera off on a GoPro, you want to press and hold that just for a few seconds until the screen shuts down. What's important when you're recording, let's say you have just finished your last inning, everybody's really excited, you're wanting to go out and do the congratulations, you're going to turn this button to turn the recording off. The worst thing you could possibly do is then reach over and press that button and turn your camera off, because it will generally corrupt that last file, then you can definitely lose it. So what I typically do when we've got that last game, that last inning, and we're going out and congratulating, I press that button to stop the recording. I go do what I need to do, and then I come back for the camera. Or I grab the camera if I'm worried about it walking away. I grab the camera and pull it off the fence, but I don't turn it off. Only when I see that it is no longer saving data do I then press and hold that button to turn the camera off. That sort of protects the integrity of that last file. And typically in a good weekend, the last file is probably the one that's the most important. Okay, but the other thing that I wanted to tell you is, I got to maneuver some cables around here, here we go. So let's say external power. We recommend using external power for everything. And the reason is because these things generally, the internal power is only going to get you, it starts out at about 2 hours if you don't have any things like Wi-Fi on. But after you've charged and discharged and charged and discharged, you're only going to get about an hour or so. So we don't trust them. We also don't like to replace the batteries, because if you need to replace a battery in mid-game, you have to pull this out of the case or pull this out of the enclosure if you have an enclosure. You have to take the door off. You have to shut the camera off. So we like to use external power. But what's really important, and I've actually not been able to get anybody from GoPro to confirm this, so if GoPro's on here and they want to confirm this, we'd love to hear. But we have actually been able to prove this in multiple occasions. If you have your camera on and you plug your external in, it is entirely possible that it is not going to recognize that external and the camera is going to shut down. All right? So what we recommend is make sure that your camera is off. Make sure that your external is plugged into a power source and that power source is on, right? External batteries typically have a button and your lights tell you that it's on, right? So when that is on, then plug your phone in, or excuse me, plug your GoPro in and turn it on. And when you do so, it will then recognize this external as an external power source rather than charge your battery. So in that same regard, years ago, we recommend with the GoPro 4 and older cameras to use what they call a battery eliminator. And that battery eliminator came in a couple of different modes, a couple of different configurations. But the last one that we really liked, it plugged into this, there was a port that was right here. It was called the auxiliary port, or what we often call the 30-pin port. And that 30-pin port, it allowed you to power the camera directly. And in powering the camera directly, you didn't have to worry about an internal battery. In fact, you could pull that internal battery out and you wouldn't have to worry about any of that stuff. And in the 6 and 7 and 8 models, because they wanted to make the camera completely waterproof without any external housing, they took that port away. And so that left you with the USB port only. So one of the things back in the old days, if you plugged the USB port in, it would do nothing but trickle charge the battery. Well, trickle charging a battery actually generates heat. And that's a big problem because it'll cause the camera to shut down, and you know, obviously that's the last thing that you want to happen. So in the 6, 7, and 8, what they did is they made a software change that said if you're using external power and you are recording, do not charge the camera. Rather, power the camera directly. And so you could record for hours, and as long as you had a decent internal charge on your GoPro, it would not depreciate. So what's also important then is to make sure that your internal battery is always, you know, let's say above half. You're always probably even higher than that. Let's say 65%. Your battery is always somewhat topped off, but you're always recording when using external power. That means your internal battery is never going to drain. It's always sort of going to be there as a backup to make sure everything's going good. But again, knowing that process, plug your device in, turn your external on, turn the camera on. In that order will make sure that the GoPro recognizes it. Always make sure that the internal battery has a charge of, let's say, 65% or higher, and then you won't have some of those stability issues that we've seen. Okay? We've gone over a lot of things, and as I'm looking over here at my screen, I honestly don't even know that this is recording, and it's going to be just really disappointing if that's not the case. The stream may have actually died, so it just may be one of those long nights. Power saver turned off. I just tapped the screen, that turned it back on. Recording, we talked about this. When you're ready to record, you just hit this button up top, and the icon that told you what mode you're in now changes to recording, and it tells you how long you've been recording. To stop, we're going to press this button. And again, the screen swiped because it was a very short video, so it didn't take, it really didn't take that much processing power. But if it was a long video, it definitely would have. And again, we're going to let that sort of go. Even if the screen is back to normal, I usually will wait 3 or 4 minutes before I then reach over and press this button to turn my camera off. Okay? That is the GoPro and GoPro Hero 8 sort of primer to sort of get you started as this ball season kicks in. We've sort of been, we've been pretty critical of GoPro in the last several years, but we started a business because of GoPro, right? The GoPro Hero, let's see, the 3 came out, and that was a really good camera. And so I looked at that camera and I said, I think I've got a way to mount that to a fence, and so I designed this bracket around the GoPro Hero 3. And the cameras started getting better and better. The blacks came out. The Hero 4 Silver, which had that LCD screen built in for the first time, was just a phenomenal camera. Then the Hero 5 came out. It was just even better. It was literally the best camera, the best piece of electronic hardware that we'd ever used. And then the Hero 6 came out, and we were so excited, and it was a flat failure, and we were so disappointed. And we reached out to GoPro and we asked them, why is this thing so unstable? And we sort of gave them the benefit of the doubt, because what GoPro tried to do with the Hero 6 is they tried to build their processor in-house, the GP1. That started with the Hero 6. They used to use an external company to do that. And I get that. Trying to do everything in-house, it saves you money, it makes you more flexible, but it just did not work. And so we gave up on our Hero 6, and we had high hopes when the Hero 7 came out, but it did the same thing. It used that GP1. So much so that when we heard that the Hero 8 was coming out, and they did not create the GP2 that they talked about, that they stuck with the GP1, we almost did not buy this camera because we knew it was going to have the problems. But it did not. We have not had the lockups. The battery life has been great. The responsiveness of the screen, the quality of the video is better than any GoPro camera that they've done. We really like this camera. It has its flaws. It does have its flaws. Like any electronic device, you're going to have to decide what works for you and what doesn't. With the Hero 7 and the Hero 8, they've tried very hard to get into the streaming world. They're not there yet. The biggest issue is that it only shoots an ultra wide. Ultra wide is useless in our field because it just records too much. And typically you're not going to record at the highest resolution when you're streaming because it's too expensive to stream. It takes such an expensive signal. You're probably not going to get that good of a signal in your area. And so you've got this super wide screen, the super wide view that's very low resolution, and people just aren't going to watch it. And so GoPro, if you're paying attention, please give us the ability to adjust the field of view when we stream. That's all we ask. You do that, and we'll recommend streaming. All right? So that's a lot, but that's our take. Again, we sort of always wanted to do this at the beginning of the season to get you guys started off right. You folks in California, Texas, and Florida, your seasons never end. You've been going along all winter long. But here in the Midwest, it's 31 degrees, and we're itching to get out at the ball field and play. And this is the camera that we're going to be using. Okay? Hope this has been helpful to you guys. If you have other questions, check us out online, www.linkspyder.com. You can catch me on email, josh@linkspyder.com. And I'm also on all of the social medias and a lot of the baseball and softball forums. You can catch me there. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you.